Astute Quotations, Part 27. A lie that is partly true is a harder matter to refute. Tennyson. A great manager forces you to have a good opinion of yourself. Baseball Hall of Famer Reggie Jackson. I'm not as good a player when I'm comfortable. Alex Rodriguez, formerly of the New York Yankees. If you don't see the book you want on the shelves, write it. Beverly Cleary, creator of the Ramona Quimby book series. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, an exclamation commonly heard until the 1970s or 80s, both in Ireland and among Irish immigrants to America. It's an apt reply to finding out that your youngest sister just got pregnant for the third time. On cold nights, my soul is like anyone's. From Numbers with Wings by the Bongos, 1983. I do not have 3,000 pairs of shoes. I have 1,060. Imelda Marcos, wife of Filipino dictator Ferdinand Marcos. If you want to make enemies, just try to change something. President Woodrow Wilson. We have sacrificed space exploration for space exploitation, which is interesting but scarcely visionary. Gene Cernan, the last man to walk on the moon. The mass gross absence of sound in space is more than just silence. Gene Cernan. Test pilots have a litmus test for evaluating problems. When something goes wrong, we ask, is this thing still flying? If the answer is yes, then there's no immediate danger, no need to overreact. Astronaut Alan Bean. One of the greatest things about the universe is that it doesn't play favorites. Alan Bean. The blackness was so intense, it was a texture. Astronaut Charles Duke. Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You've got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. Charles Duke at NASA, responding to Apollo 11 as it touched down on the moon. This line was sampled in the masterpiece 2015 single called Go by the duo known as Public Service Broadcasting, one of hundreds of songs basically banned from American airplay over the years because of its high originality. Be thankful for problems. If they were less difficult, someone with less ability might have your job. Astronaut Jim Lovell. It wasn't the Supreme Court that expelled God from our classrooms. It was the textbook publishers. Journalist James Kilpatrick. Help that is not positively necessary is a hindrance to a growing organism. Dorothy Canfield Fisher, educator and social activist. The truth of a thing is the feel of it, not the think of it. Film director Stanley Kubrick. If you can talk brilliantly about a problem, it can create the consoling illusion that it has been mastered. Stanley Kubrick. He just wasn't subtle enough. Doug Flutie, NFL quarterback and broadcaster, regarding a defensive end who couldn't evade a penalty for pass interference. And that was from December of 2016 when he said that. The deepest truths are best read between the lines and, for the most part, refuse to be written. Educator Amos Bronson Alcott, 1799 to 1888. Every dogma embodies some shade of truth to give it superficial merit. Amos Branson Alcott. The best apples fall last, and they keep the longest. Alcott. What's up? Knee-jerk question upon meeting an acquaintance. A preposition. Proper response to such an empty question. Honey, disconnect the phone. From Back in the USSR by the modern-day reincarnation of Shakespeare. Any change or reform you make is going to have consequences you don't like. Congressman Morris Udall. Jane, stop this crazy thing. George Jetson. Inspiration usually comes during work rather than before it. Madeleine L'Engle, author of A Wrinkle in Time. Don't try to catch two frogs with one hand. Chinese proverb. Do flowers in the spring say, not yet? Novelist Norman Douglas. Education is a state-controlled manufactory of echoes. Norman Douglas. Grumbling is the death of love. Actress Marlene Dietrich. We fear the thing we want the most. Dr. Robert Anthony, professor of management at Harvard. You can't expect to communicate with anyone if you're a bore. Novelist John Cheever. I don't want people who want to dance. I want people who have to dance. George Balanchine, who has been called the father of American ballet. In the case of an airplane, speed is determined by the outcome of the conflict between the thrust of power and the drag of the plane. So it also is with humans. Jacqueline Cochran, aviation pioneer. For me to live without risk would be tantamount to death. Jacqueline Cochran. That's a bunch of caca. Werner Erhard. The fear of being conned is not what really runs people. It is the fear that someone else will think they've been conned. Werner Erhard. When hope dies, hopelessness dies with it. Werner Erhard. Concealed talent brings no reputation. Erasmus, theologian, 1465 to 1536. Don't give your advice until called upon. Erasmus. Many times what can't be refuted by argument can be dismissed with laughter. Erasmus. We judge others according to results. How else? Not knowing the process by which results are arrived at. Novelist George Eliot, born Mary Ann Evans. I found out that water can be drunk straight. Billy Carter, brother of President Jimmy Carter. Rashness is the faithful but unhappy parent of misfortune. Buckminster Fuller. Society expects all earnestly responsible communication to be crisply brief. In the meantime, humanity has been deprived of comprehensive understanding. Buckminster Fuller. You can't better the world by simply talking to it. Philosophy, to be effective, must be mechanically applied. Buckminster Fuller. All human advances occur in the outlaw area. Buckminster Fuller, meaning on the periphery of where the action is generally considered to be. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Edward Smith, captain of the Titanic. Loss of sincerity is loss of vital power. Christian Nestal-Bovee, 1820 to 1904. Gugug Jub, from I Am the Walrus. The fires are crashing to the ground. Oh, the humanity. Radio journalist Herb Morrison witnessing the crash of the Hindenburg in 1937. We only really face up to ourselves when we are afraid. Austrian novelist Thomas Bernhard. Never mind. Gilda Radner of Saturday Night Live. Something must be left to chance. Nothing is sure in a sea fight. Admiral Horatio Nelson. Defensive strategy has never produced ultimate victory. General Douglas MacArthur. The more original a discovery, the more obvious it seems afterwards. Arthur Koestler, Hungarian-British author. Today there is a new moon in the sky. The Soviet Union, after the launch of Sputnik in 1957. Thank goodness my education was neglected. Beatrix Potter. Men are wise in proportion not to their experience, but to their capacity for experience. James Boswell, 1740 to 1795. To understand what the outside of an aquarium looks like, it's better not to be a fish. André Malraux, French novelist. The truth about a man lies, first and foremost, in what he hides. André Malraux. The amount of good luck coming your way depends upon your willingness to act. Barbara Scher, motivational speaker. It is in trifles and when he is off his guard that a man best shows his character. Arthur Schopenhauer, German philosopher. Those whose approval you seek most give you the least. Maurice Chevalier, French singer and actor. We see what we see because we miss all the finer details. Alfred Korzybski, linguist. Thought is valuable to the degree it is generative. Novelist Edward Bulwer Lytton, 1803 to 1873. It was a dark and stormy night. Opening line first penned by Bulwer Lytton. Bring on the new Messiah, wherever he may roam. Echo and the Bunnymen from their masterpiece, Bring on the Dancing Horses. The wisest are the most annoyed at the loss of time. Dante. Truth has not an urgent air about it. Boileau, 1636 to 1711. Rulers always hate and suspect the next in succession. Tacitus, 1st century A.D. Virtue withers away if it has no opposition. Seneca, 1st century A.D. I don't intend to stop showing a little cleavage. Children's author Judith Vorst. This game shouldn't be called baseball. It should be called adjustments. Oral Hershiser, pitcher and broadcaster. We're growing serious, and that's the very next step to being dull. Joseph Addison, essayist and poet, 1715. Men perish because they cannot join the beginning with the end. Alcmaeon, 5th century BC. He would just patiently wait until I finished trying to get the words out. Annie Glenn, who suffered from a severe stuttering problem, wife of astronaut John Glenn. I'm just going down to the corner store to get a pack of gum. John Glenn to Annie every time he flew on a mission. Don't be long. Annie's standard reply. There's nothing that cleanses your soul like getting the shit kicked out of you. Woody Hayes, college football coach. Even the best team without a sound game plan can't score. Woody Hayes. A good general always makes you search for his weaknesses. Woody Hayes. The success of the wicked entices many more. Phaedrus, 1st century AD. Praise undeserved is satire in disguise. Henry Broadhurst, 1849 to 1911. Find the grain of truth in criticism. Don Sutton, Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher. Our boys are going to try a flight today. If it's successful, it'll make history. Milton Wright, father of Wilbur and Orville. Doing easily what others find difficult is talent. Doing what is impossible for talent to do is genius. Henri Frederick Amiel, Swiss philosopher, 1821 to 1881. You won't be famous until people start saying the worst things they can about you. Don't worry, it's a good sign. Nellie Melba, opera singer, 1861 to 1931. There are two things I like stiff, and one of them is jelly. Nellie Melba. Everybody undertakes what he sees another successful man in, whether he has the aptitude for it or not. Goethe. He who seeks to terrify others is more in fear himself. Claudian, 4th century AD. Every intellectual revolution that has ever stirred humanity into greatness has been a passionate protest against inert ideas. Alfred North Whitehead. It is not hard work that is dreary, it is superficial work. Edith Hamilton, classical scholar. We know, but from its shade, the present hour. Poet William Wordsworth from an inscription found on a sundial. Wisdom is oftentimes nearer when we stoop than when we soar. Wordsworth. I have noticed that when chickens quit quarreling over their food, they often find there's enough for all of them. Don Marquis, journalist, humorist, 1878 to 1937. If you make people think they're thinking, they'll love you. But if you really make them think, they'll hate you. Don Marquis. When the freedom they wished for most was freedom from responsibility, then Athens ceased to be free and was never free again. Edith Hamilton. Not yet Americanized, still eating Italian food. Report from a social worker in New York City, early 20th century. The 4 basic food groups: alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, and chocolate. Heard in the cafeteria at the Food and Drug Administration. A misbehaving child is a discouraged child. Rudolf Dreikurs, Austrian psychiatrist. Whoever alters a person's expectations alters his behavior. Rudolf Dreikurs. Nothing is true except that which is unsaid. Jean Anouilh, French playwright. A genius knows how to make himself easily understood without being obvious about it. Jean Anouilh. They say that the lady from Philadelphia who is staying in town is very wise. Suppose I go ask her what is best to be done. Journalist Lucretia Hale, 1820 to 1900. West Camden, alternate name for Philadelphia. What stands in your way is that you have too much willful will. You think that what you don't do yourself doesn't happen. Eugen Herrigel, author of Zen in the Art of Archery, 1954. You must learn to wait properly. Eugen Herrigel. Necessity is the excuse for every infringement of freedom. William Pitt the Elder, 1708 to 1778. If you've got to remind yourself to concentrate during competition, you've got no chance to concentrate. Bobby Nichols, former pro golfer. No really great man ever thought of himself as such. William Hazlitt, 1778 to 1830. As is our confidence, so is our capacity. William Hazlitt. An extraordinary amount of arrogance is present in any claim of having been the first to invent something. Benoit Mandelbrot, Polish-born mathematician. Well, let me correct the pronunciation of his first name. It's Benoit Mandelbrot. I only have to stop the puck, not beat it to death. Don Beaupre, NHL goalie. Love is warfare. Ovid. The silent countenance often speaks. Ovid. The countenance is the portrait of the soul, and the eyes mark its intentions. Cicero. Whoever isn't too wise is wise. Marshall, 1st century A.D. Conceal a flaw, and the world will imagine the worst. Marshall. Spare the person, but lash the vice. Marshall. Give her an inch and see what she does with it. Doc Love. Mastery requires no force. Werner Erhard. The assumption of any position necessarily implies its opposite position. Werner Erhard. One does not arrive at fundamental laws and principles as a function of what is already known. Werner Erhard. Sunday sauce. Italian expression for the best sauce of the week when families got together for larger meals, also known as Sunday gravy. The success of your presentation will be judged not by the knowledge you send, but by what the listener receives. Lily Walters, professional speaker. Any plan conceived in moderation must fail when the circumstances reach the extreme. Clemens von Metternich, German statesman, 1773 to 1859. The obvious is always least understood. Clemens von Metternich. The demon will lie to confuse us, but he will also mix lies with the truth to attack us. From The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Procrastination is what we often call resistance. William Peter Blatty. There are two lions guarding the entrance to truth and enlightenment. Their names are paradox and confusion. Taoist saying. By the way, these lions now guard the entrance to the New York Public Library. For peace of mind, resign your position of general manager of the universe. Heard at the New Age seminar. In honorable dealing, you should consider what you intended, not what you thought. Women think with their whole bodies, and they see things as a whole more than men do. Dorothy Day, social activist. Don't call me a saint. I don't want to be dismissed so easily. Dorothy Day. I'll be your saint if you want me to stoop that low. Adorable from I'll Be Your Saint, 1990. A flirt is like a recruiting agent, always on the lookout for new victims. Playwright Douglas Jerrold, 1803 to 1857. Love sought is good, but given unsought is better. From Twelfth Night. Do not hold grain, waiting for higher prices when people are hungry. Zoroaster, prophet of ancient Iran. I think and think for months, for years. 99 times the conclusion is false. The 100th time I am right. Einstein. Drain the swamp. Donald Trump. I needed to turn off the negative voice in my head. Michelle Kwan, Olympic medalist in figure skating. Suburbia is where the developer bulldozes the streets and then names the streets after them. Let me say that again. Suburbia is where the developer bulldozes the trees and then names the streets after them. Bill Vaughn, newspaper columnist. Always take an emergency with a level head. Chinese proverb. None of the really great discoveries was made by a specialist or a so-called researcher. Martin H. Fisher, physician, 1879 to 1962. Extreme bigots are almost always super patriots. Psychologist Gordon Allport. The further the soul advances, the greater are the adversaries against which it must contend. Evagrius Ponticus, 4th century A.D. And this completes Astute Quotations.